You were taught that the men fighting beside you were your brothers. That you were fighting in the name of the people. And I think people should know there's a price to be paid. Our silence.
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war. And you have to commit to a side.
The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn has been fighting for workers' rights in Australia for more than 100 years. They believe the law should serve everyone and not just those that can afford it. So for empathetic and expert legal support, call Maurice Blackburn Lawyers today. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We're taping this one on a Tuesday afternoon. Is that right? It is Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday. It's the bloody getting ready for Easter. I'm still trying to get to Friday quicker than it will allow me. It is Tuesday, and we're taping this one on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And we are doing Easter pop culture special. I think we've done this before. I think we've jagged the odd Easter one. We don't do it every year. We definitely do an end of year pop culture special, but I think we've done an Easter one before. And because it's Easter, it's the holy month. There's a bunch of, I would say, Catholic or Catholic adjacent film or TV series out there. So I thought we'd bring in our, I was going to say bring in our resident Catholic, but no, bring in our resident pop culture entertainment contributor, Tess Farrell. Great to see you. Welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I'm glad you verified that. Not resident Catholic, but I am here to talk all things Catholic film, Catholic TV show. I'm excited to get into it.
Excellent. We're going to do two bits of pop culture. We're going to look at a TV series that came out just recently. We'll do that one first. We'll look at the TV series that came out, Say Nothing, in the first half. And the second half, we're going to look at a film that came out late last year called Conclave. But let's do the TV series first, Say Nothing. Over to you. Tell me about it.
Great. Well, Say Nothing is a historical drama. It's about the Troubles and the IRA in Northern Ireland, so a period of violence spanning 70s, 80s, 90s. It's a 9-part series based on the 2018 non-fiction book called Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe. The series was released late last year in 2024. It's produced by FX and you can watch it on Disney Plus in Australia. It's got pretty high ratings. It's got 94% on Rotten Tomatoes and 82% on IMDb. The series stars Lola Pettigrew, Anthony Boyle, Hazel Dupe, and Maxine Peake, along many others. It's got quite a big cast, and it was created by Joshua Zetumer. Should I dive into the plot a little before I get your opinion on the show, Stephen? I am very interested to talk to you about it.
Do you want to let's do the plot first, and then we'll start to unpack it a bit.
Yeah, great. Okay, so the plot of Say Nothing follows the book, which is a true story, and it starts out with the abduction of Jean McConville in 1972 from her flat in Belfast. So she's taken from the IRA, from her 10 children, because they suspect that she was an informant for the British forces. So that's where the series starts, and from there it largely focuses on two members of the IRA, so two sisters, Dolores and Marion Price, sort of from their late teens early 20s, into the early 2000s or, into their 60s. So the Price sisters were, I suppose, quite prominent members of the IRA. They grew up in a Republican family. Their parents were Republicans. They were members of the IRA, and both of their parents had spent time in jail. And we sort of first see them the two sisters attending a peaceful march in Derry that they were then ambushed and attacked by Protestant loyalists. And that was sort of the catalyst for them to join the IRA. And from there, it just follows their life, really, their interactions with key IRA figures at the time. So Brendan the Dark Hughes, Gerry Adams, who is portrayed as a leader of the IRA in Belfast at the time, but goes on to be quite a prominent Irish politician and the leader of Sinn Féin. And the series just covers what the Price sisters did for the IRA locally in Belfast, but also abroad, including a bombing in London, time in jail, and then the impact of their actions pretty much throughout their whole lives, including the peace process. So we're covering a huge time period, and the stories sort of weave going backwards and forwards. And one of the key drivers of the plot is actually that one of the sisters, Dolores Price, gave interviews about her history in the IRA to the Boston College's Belfast Project, which several members of the IRA did. So they recorded interviews about what they did in the IRA, but the tapes were only to be released after they died. So it's the two sort of parallel stories, one of the sisters, Dolores and Marion, and then the story of Jean McConville's children who spend their life sort of looking for their mother who was taken by the IRA and never seen again. It's quite a dark series. It can be quite violent and quite confronting, and definitely captures that feeling of fear and violence of the time in Northern Ireland. But there's also light in it too. Like, it is essentially following two young women in the Price sisters, especially at the beginning. It sort of starts out like a comical heist movie almost when they first join the IRA, and then it sort of progressively gets darker from there. But I'm very interested to hear what you think. I really enjoyed it, Stephen. Did you?
Yeah, I did, but I was very there was a sense of it of intrepidation about watching it. I knew about the book. Several members of my own family had read the book and said, "Stephen, you need to read this." And I had knew about the book, and I had known about the court case where the British government were seeking to get access to the tapes through the United States and trying to essentially extradite the tapes from Boston College. Boston College had given assurances to all of the participants in this oral history that it wouldn't ever be released until all of them had passed away, not just the individuals that had given it. So I knew a lot of the backstory to it. So when the book was written, I didn't read it. And I didn't read it because a couple of reasons. One, growing up in an Irish Catholic, Republican, I don't need to word this appropriately, favourable household, or sympathetic is probably the proper word. And for those out there who are from sort of my kind of background, my parents are Glaswegian, and so therefore, there's sort of that, and our Celtic supporters, that will now make sense. When I was at late teens and my early 20s, I read so much of Irish history. My book collection at home has a whole Irish history section to itself that covers 2 shelves. So actually, after I finished reading all that sort of stuff, I kind of got a bit over it. When you listen to a band just over and over and over for maybe 2, 3, 4 years, and then you sort of go, I'm done with that. But I kind of finished reading. I said, okay, I think I know everything I now need to know, and I'm just going to put a pin in that. But also when this book came out, I knew exactly what it was about, and I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to go back to that, because it was going to be talking about matters that really weren't written about when books were written about the Troubles in the 80s and 90s. It was now picking up picking off scabs that I was kind of like, I just don't think I want to know about that anymore. I mean, we kind of knew about it, but I just didn't really, I don't know if I wanted to be confronted with it. So I kind of sat on it for a while. And then so when I did watch the series, and I've still not read the book, I may go back and read the book, but when I watched the series, I had to sort of steel myself for like, you know, this is going to be confronting and difficult. Particularly now, if you go back to Belfast, you really get a sense that the city and Northern Ireland and the younger community, they're just trying to move on. They're just trying to like, you know, can we put all that behind us? But you can't unless you reflect on the sins of the past. And so I think it's an important book and an important historical drama. So I thought it was very well done. Obviously, there was a couple of, you know, there's a lot of parts through it that is contentious. Not in particular. At the end of every single episode, there's a reminder up on the screen that Gerry Adams denies ever being a member of the IRA or whatever, you know, which I don't know if you're going to talk later on about the memes that have followed on from this, but anyway.
I haven't seen them.
Oh, right. Well, maybe we could talk about weaknesses of the series or something later on. But anyway, so yes, did I enjoy it? Yes. Was it heavy going? Yes. Was it important to watch? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I came into it from a little bit of a different lens to you, I suppose. I might just tell a quick story about my Irish history. So my Irish, I have Irish heritage in me, of course, but, you know, a long, long time ago, sort of late 1800s, my family came out. I, too, was always sort of taught to be a proud Republican in my household. And in the year 2000, in year 7, we were meant to do a school assignment on our heroes, like make a poster and get up there and do a little speech. So I would have been 12 or something. And my dad convinced me to do it on Michael Collins, who was an IRA sort of leader and, you know, what was it, 1912, 1920 to the 1920s, quite a prominent figure. And, you know, all my other schoolmates were sort of doing their posters on Kathy Freeman and Susie O'Neill, and there I was sort of like diving into Michael Collins and, you know, getting freedom for Ireland. But it didn't make me a popular person at high school, that poster. I don't even know. It's not even taught in Australian school. It certainly wasn't taught, you know, the conflict between England and Ireland was not taught where I went to school. So everyone was like, okay, who's Michael Collins, this old Irish bloke, no worries, and kind of moved on. And so I kind of dipped out of Irish history after that. So for me, this was all, you know, of course I know about the conflict between England and Ireland, but for me, this was all new information. Like I didn't know about the Price sisters. I didn't know about Gerry Adams, and we'll go into that a little later. But the series does have, you know, several characters, and you know, it's a true story, so they're all real, which does provide, you know, quite an interesting layer of complexity. So you've got Lola Pettigrew as younger Dollars Price, and then Maxine Peake as older Dollars Price. You've got Hazel Dupe and Helen Behan as younger and older Marion Price, Josh Finnan and Michael Coughlin as Gerry Adams, Judith Roddy as Jean McConville, and Anthony Boyle and Tom Vaughan Lawler as Brendan Hughes. I think for me, the standout performances were definitely Dollars Price, so Lola Pettigrew and Maxine Peake. I think they did a really incredible job there of transitioning from the young version to the older version later in life, and just watching her struggle, you know, right from the beginning when she joined the IRA. You know, for her it was one of the proudest things, you know, you could do, and then to watch her sort of struggle with that later in life was really, really difficult. But Gerry Adams was also a standout performance for me. So he's obviously a very prominent Irish political leader, so credited with, you know, helping, you know, with the peace process and ending the conflict in Northern Ireland. And it's wild to me that he only retired from politics in 2018. Like he's very, real, which is wild. And yes, he denied he was a member of the IRA, and there's that huge disclaimer shown at the end of every episode. But I was just obsessed with him. I was obsessed with his accent, like what he did, how he ended up, in politics long term. I thought his performance was actually outstanding. Kind of a terrifying character. I don't think they portrayed him favourably at all. But those two were, particular characters that I found the most captivating out of them all. What about you? Standout performances for you?
I mean, both Price sisters, the characters that played both Price sisters, and interesting enough for the viewers playing along at home, as Tess pointed out, it does jump from the 60s to I guess it's the early 90s. And so therefore the characters are substantially older. So therefore they bring in different actors to play those characters as themselves later on. And in terms of strengths, the casting for both Dolores and Marion Price was excellent in that the maintaining that continuity, it felt somewhat believable, as opposed to, I guess they could have stuck with the younger actresses and just used heavy makeup to make them look older, but obviously they chose not to do that and chose to get different actors, which can be tricky, right? Because interpreting a particular character from two different actors' viewpoints can be risky in that you kind of get a different vibe for the different character later on in life. So I felt like watching particularly Dolores' character that we were seeing the same person but just older and more runs on the board. So I thought that went really well. That was one of the strengths of the series for me. And I know we'll do weaknesses in a minute, but I thought that the young Jerry Adams was excellent. I thought the older Jerry Adams was average. And it was it was really annoying me. I couldn't stop looking at the fake beard. The fake beard was really driving me insane. It was like a bad ABC drama from the 1970s, and they went to the props department and they only had one, and they sort of said, "Oh, that'll do," you know. Whereas young Jerry Adams looked like young Jerry Adams and acted like young Jerry Adams, and I just got so used to him that I just kind of was like, oh, why couldn't we just make him look older? Because the other guy doesn't look like Jerry Adams to me, and that was a weakness for me, and it just kind of annoyed me a little bit. And it took me a while for me to kind of get used to the new actor, if that makes sense, playing 1990s version of Jerry.
Right. Okay. Well, I had the opposite, but I hadn't Googled what Jerry looked like before watching, so I had that benefit. But yeah, they really did transition those characters really, really well, especially both of the sisters. And I also thought one of the strengths for me was, the pace, right? Like I thought that I would get bored of the story. You know, how much could possibly happen? I hadn't read Say Nothing, the book, so I wasn't, across it all. But I thought they did a really good job of having a compelling pace in each episode and over, the whole 9-episode series. Because it is a lot to fit in, right? And these are huge historical events over a really, really long time period. And so to stay interested the whole time, I think that's really good writing and really good performances in the actors as well. And even though they were jumping from, different decades and spanning sort of a huge time span, it didn't feel like it was too choppy, or it didn't feel, I thought the transitions were really good.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you think about the Troubles, that so much happened from, the late 1960s when the modern Troubles kicked off to the Good Friday Agreement and I guess the modern day peace process through to, the late 1990s. And for them to, if you're the writer of it, to try and work out, okay, how do we fit all of what we need to fit in within 9 episodes, 940-ish minute episodes, is a bit of a task. And as I was watching it, I hadn't fast forwarded or jumped on Wikipedia to see how they were going to break it up. I was just letting the series come at me. And I was wondering, as we were moving through, how are they going to do that? Because we did spend certainly the first 2 or 3 or 4 episodes bogged down, no pun intended, in the 60s, right? And as you said, the young women's recruitment as a volunteer into the IRA, and then slowly working their way through the Belfast Brigade and taking on bigger and more daring and riskier and violent missions. But I guess that the pace quickens when they get arrested and go to prison, and you go through the whole blanket protests and going on the hunger strike and being force-fed and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty full on. And then it kind of then makes this huge leap, doesn't it, to the 90s. We introduce these new characters. I do wondered about that when we did make that jump to the 90s. I wondered, I mean, you had to, when we jump to the 90s, that's kind of when we bring in the McConville family. And in that moment, you kind of go, oh, shit, I forgot all about them. Like, really, this is, Say Nothing is about this veil of secrecy that happened in both Republican and Loyalist communities about not grasping or touting on the paramilitaries that were running those communities, both against the British, essentially, or certainly more the Republican community. And it's like as if a whole brand new story was reintroduced in the second half of the series. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because we meet Jean McConville right at the start, and then we never really talk about them again until late in the series. And I wondered if there was something missing in that journey. I don't know. I would get interested in your reflections on that.
I mean, but doesn't that follow sort of the natural timeline, right? Like, she did disappear. And, they were forgotten about. This didn't just happen to Jean McConville, it happened to, others as well. And, it does seem a bit strange to be popping back up in the final few episodes where Jean McConville's children and they go and they try and they actually go to dig up sites to try and find her body. But that's kind of what happens, right? Like, she disappeared for that time. Nothing happened until that time, until there was a concerted effort, in the 90s to campaign on it and to recover the bodies and find out what happened to them. So I did read something interesting, and that kind of goes to, we have the Belfast Project, the tapes for Brendan Hughes and Douglas Price. So we know a lot more about that time, like what they were doing and thinking. We know a lot more about them than obviously we do about Jean McConville or her children. So it's kind of hard. You can't really, I think it would be much more difficult to go in depth about the McConville children when we don't know as much about them. And, we don't know as much about Jean. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, but I think it sort of just follows the natural sort of timeline of what happened.
In your, how much internet research were you doing as you're watching, and what were you uncovering, and how did that shape your perception of the series?
I had to do live Googling and basically became obsessed with pictures of Gerry Adams at like people's funerals, and did this really happen? Did he really go to Brendan Hughes? Did he really carry the coffin? So I was doing it in real time. I could hardly keep up, to be honest with you, and so it was quite intense. I did have to rewind a lot because I would miss things because I was deep in a Wikipedia page.
That's amazing.
Would you say that's a weakness for you, not delving into Jean McConville's story a little more?
Look, there are a couple of tragic components. It's all tragic, really, but there was conflicting evidence within the community about Jean McConville. Her background was she was half Catholic, half Protestant. So she came from a divided community. She moved into the Divis Flats from a Protestant community because her husband was Protestant. He passed away widowed. her and the 10 kids moved back into a Republican community on the Falls Road. There were views within the Republican community that she was that she just didn't buy into this bullshit, but she just had to get housing was tough. Any housing, still talking about housing in 2025, but housing. You're a mother, a single mother, a widowed mother with 10 kids, trying to find somewhere in public housing in Northern Ireland was difficult, and far more difficult if you were Catholic or from a Republican nationalist background. So your choices weren't. Your choices were scarce. But her moving into the Divis Flat area, which was a particular stronghold for the Republican community, she was looked upon with suspicion from the get-go. And I just don't think the story drew out that enough.
Right.
And I'm certainly not suggesting that, I wouldn't have a clue either way, but, it kind of gives a bit more context as to why she was
suspected.
Yeah, and lifted and, and then murdered. And once again, shouldn't have happened. But I think one of the themes of this show is that in the middle of a civil war, nothing is black and white. Everything is, multiple shades of grey, and this romanticism that you may have for one side or the other, it's challenging you that it's not, Republicans good, Loyalists bad, or Ireland good, Britain bad. You know what I mean? It's you see multiple sides of it, and it's meant for you. I think it's designed for you to question your probably long-held views about who are the good guys and who are the bad guys in this. And you see that through the characters as well. Doris, I think one of her famous quotes in the show was, "I didn't join the IRA to kill Catholics."
Yeah, it's tough because I know it follows a book, but it is so specific. It does cover, quite a lot of, historical events, but it is a limited view of the Troubles, right? Like, if you don't know anything about the conflict, you're not, there isn't actually a lot about sort of what the English did to the Irish, everywhere, but specifically in Northern Ireland. Like, you get some glimpse of it in, the scenes with Frank Kitson, the British Army officer, and he was sort of quite controversial from what I gather, like quite a hard line, like really responsible for some of the tough operations on the British side.
Yeah.
And you see that a little bit, but that's sort of in the first couple of episodes, but then it sort of disappears. You don't really see sort of British retaliation or anything like that for the rest of the series. So, I know it's following particular characters and their stories and the book, but, if you came into it not knowing about the conflict, you probably wouldn't feel very positive about the IRA at all, but that's just the nature of the story that's being told, I suppose.
Yeah, I do wonder if the director just assumes that the types of people that are going to be watching this show, when they had their audience in mind, that people already had, even if they hadn't grown up in Ireland or in the North or even in Britain through that period, that you've at least watched In the Name of the Father, Michael Collins, Some Mother's Son, just ticking off all of the Wind That Shook the Barley. So you've got a good sense of that, the reasons why the Troubles first, kicked off in the late 60s.
I did go back and rewatch Michael Collins after this. It kind of spurred me on this little, I watched Dairy Girls as well. Michael Collins stands up as a film, I will say, as an entertainment piece. If anyone wants to watch that over the Easter period, you could add that to your Irish Catholic viewing.
It does, except for oh my God, what's her name? She's in the American actress that plays
Julia Roberts. That's the love interest.
Her Irish accent is appalling.
I didn't even think she was doing one. I thought she just had her American accent.
Top 5 worst Irish accents ever done in the history of modern cinema is definitely up there, along with Brad Pitt in The Devil's Own.
But do you know what is also interesting is Stephen Ray's in that film, right, who's a very famous Irish actor, and Dollars Price was married to Stephen Ray, which I just think is crazy. Like, he's still a very famous Irish actor working to this day. And, he was married to this really sort of prominent IRA figure. And that to me is just wild.
Yeah, bizarre.
Should we do some quick? Did you have any other weaknesses?
No, I don't. I think it was fantastic. It was really, really enjoyable to watch, albeit hard.
Yes. Yeah. Should we do some new quick fire questions then now?
Yes. Please
All
do.
right. Is this better as a film or TV series?
Definitely TV series. It would be, this film would, I remember that film by Scorsese, The Irishman, that went for 7 hours. If you wanted to make this into a film, it would equally be as long as The Irishman, and you wouldn't be able to cover it all off. So no, TV series, perfect TV series actually.
Yes, I definitely agree that it should be a TV series. There's too much material to fit into a movie. And I didn't watch The Irishman for that exact reason. It was too long. Would you buy the soundtrack or just stand in the headphone booths at Sanity and just listen for a while for free?
What's your take on that? Because I obviously I watched it, maybe finished watching it 2 months ago. I don't really recall too much killer music, even though it was from both the 60s and the 90s, and they could have just sort of done a bit. Like, Dairy Girls was very good at grabbing music from the time, like Take That and that kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't really recall music that stood out to me in terms of a soundtrack.
No, the soundtrack wasn't memorable for me either, so I'd definitely be listening for free. I don't think I'd be purchasing. And plus, the score is quite dark, so I'm not listening to that. It would creep me out too much on my own. Okay. How would News Limited report on this story, and how would Fairfax report on this story if they were going to do it?
What have you got for that one?
I think the Herald Sun would say something like horror kidnap, that takes up like a quarter of the front page. 10 children left parentless as gang of poor Catholic youths take mother from rundown flat.
Yeah.
And I think the Age would go something more like IRA allows women to join ranks for the first time. Because they really, I don't know this for sure, but Dawes and Marion were some of the first women to actually go and, do paramilitary sort of action, not just sort of support the cause. Yeah.
The only one I can think of would be, mother of 10 children go missing, Daniel Andrews to blame would be the Herald Sun headline that I can think of.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about Dan. I'm sure he was involved in some way.
I'm sure.
Some way.
Yeah.
Who are the Social Democrats in this show? I might need a lesson in current day Northern Irish politics, but I'm assuming Gerry Adams is a Social Democrat.
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay. Please school me.
No, they're really. I mean, the thing about and it didn't really. I don't think it even came up. John Hume was the leader of the Social Democratic Labor Party in Northern Irish politics, and they were the moderate nationalist party, and Sinn Féin were the hardline Republican party. And so the peace process doesn't happen without all of the major parties being involved and giving concessions. But John Hume, who's passed away, he was awarded with David Trimble, who was a leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, who was the moderate loyal Unionist Party in Northern Irish politics. They were both awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in the lead up to the Good Friday Agreement. But I guess John Hume would be the Social Democrat, and he basically was a Gerry Adams whisperer. He was the one who was constantly having back-channel conversations with Adams to try and bring him into the negotiations for the Good Friday Agreement. This is once he's been elected a member of Westminster. And then meanwhile, Adams is obviously trying to quell the hardline elements within the IRA. Not that he was a member of it, of course.
Allegedly a member.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a good lesson for me in Irish politics. Is there a Kevin Rudd, a Julia Gillard, a Bob Hawke, or a Paul Keating in this film? I'm too scared to give comparisons. I don't want to. Do you?
Well, I tell you what, the actress that played young Dolores could definitely play a young Julia Gillard. Both they look very similar.
Yeah. I think they even had similar haircuts, sort of.
Yeah.
Julia back in the day had a bit of a short haircut. So, amazing. She'd be amazing at playing Julia Gillard, I think.
Yeah, I don't know how she'd do the Australian accent, but and try and drop that Belfast accent. But there's a lookalike there. Is there a Kevin Ryder or Julia Gillard or Bob Hawke or a Paul Keating in this? I mean, probably not.
No, not that we could accurately.
I mean, Bob Hawke and Jerry Adams are probably as pragmatic as each other and saw the bigger picture. That would definitely be the case. But that would then make Brendan Clark Paul Keating. And I don't think that would work out either for either of them. And I don't think Kevin Ryder's in this situation. Anyway.
All right. The Mal Colston Award. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did.
Most likely to rat. I mean, this whole show is about touts and rats, so it's hard to pick one. Did you pick one?
Yeah, I know. Like both the Dark and Dolores obviously agreed to give these oral histories to Boston College, but under the assurances that it would never come to light until all of the participants in the Belfast project had deceased or passed away. Is that ratting? I mean, I think oral history is an important thing to be done, particularly in something as complex as the Troubles. Their intentions, obviously, certainly Dolores's and also Brendan Hughes, was to get this off their chest. I don't think they do it if they knew that it would become public whilst they were still alive. One, the repercussions would be deadly. But two, I don't think that they could betray the cause, quote unquote, whilst they were still alive. So, I guess that's it's to be observed from your own perspective. Some people would see them as absolute rats to the cause and to their community, whereas others would not. But if there was to be an award, it probably would be those two.
Agree. Who's the weakest link, actor or character? Do you have one? Yeah,
older Jerry Adams.
Beard. Now I'm going to have to go back and see the fake beard.
It looked bad.
I didn't have a weakest link. I wish we got to see more of Frank Kitson, the British Army officer, because he was terrifying, and also I thought the actor that played him was really good too. So that was a weak point for me. Any quotable lines?
Well, only the one I shared before, which is I didn't sign up to kill Catholics, was the one that sort of stood out to me. I'm sure there was some absolute banging funny ones because there actually was a bit of humour in the earlier parts of the series, less so later on in life, but I just don't recall anything. What have you got?
Yeah, I've got Dollar says when you join the IRA, there's always this question, how far are you willing to go, which I think sums up sort of the show. And there were some funny lines like just about the girls just wanting to do what the boys do and that kind of thing. Their first bank robbery is a really sort of funny, sort of exciting scene. So that's one of my favourite scenes from early in the series.
Yeah, brilliant.
All right, your rating out of 5 NAT conference delegate quotas. What are you giving?
I'd give it 4.5 quotas to National Conference. I would. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, 4 for me.
Very good. Well done. Where can you watch this? I forgot what was on.
On Disney Plus.
On Disney Plus. Isn't it normally when you think about Disney, it's like Fantasia and Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, and not into Civil War violence?
Yeah, there's some really creepy things on Disney, so make sure you have your kiddie controls on or whatever they're called, parental controls for watching. But yes, because we get all the Hulu shows, I think, go to Disney.
Yeah, right. Nice one. Good work. Thank you. Or as
You're welcome.
Gareth Miller Mahogany. Okay, let's do Conclave, which was a 2024 political thriller directed by Edward Berger and written by Peter Strawn, and it's based on this novel written by Robert Harris in 2016. And the film stars Ralph Fiennes, but apparently it's Rafe to him. Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Sergio Castellitto, and Isabella Rossellini. And in the film, basically this guy, Cardinal Thomas Lawrence, which is played by Fiennes, organises the conclave to elect the new pontiff after the Pope passes away from a heart attack. And he finds himself investigating secrets and scandals about all the major candidates as they go into what is called the conclave, which is basically a closed doors ballot for the new pope by a number of cardinals, over 160 of them from around the world. The film grossed 115 million worldwide on a budget of 20 million, which is that's good money. We should get into film making, Tess. And it got 8.1 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm just going to quickly go through the plot, and then maybe we can just do some sort of unpacking of some of the themes and characters and whatnot. So basically, the Pope dies of a heart attack, and the College of Cardinals, under the leadership of the Dean, which is the Dean of Rome. I'm not going to go into the sort of the various leadership structures within the Catholic Church, but he's someone who works basically to the Pope. Thomas Lawrence of the United Kingdom convenes the conclave to elect its successor. There are 4 leading candidates. Aldo Bellini of the United States, and he is played by Stanley Tucci. He's a progressive. Joshua Zetumer, who is a cardinal from Nigeria, and he's a social conservative. Joseph Tremblay of Canada, and I didn't realise he was from Canada until I sort of read the show notes. He's meant to be a moderate, and I did not pick up that he was supposed to be a moderate when I watched it. And Cardinal Tedesco from Italy, who was a staunch traditionalist and wants the Mass back in Latin, and so all pre-1962, that pre-Vatican II type Catholicism. Okay. The themes. Let me talk about the themes. Do you want to do characters or themes first?
Maybe themes.
Themes. So there are a whole bunch of themes really in this film. It's obviously the politics of the Vatican and the institution of the Catholic Church. It really does go to sort of the heart of all the various factions and alliances and groupings within this broad church that we know that is the Catholic Church. 1.3 billion of us around the world. Sort of liberals versus conservatives, new church versus old church. So sort of Europe and the United States versus the emerging church, which is in Latin America and Africa. The sort of inside story about what happens inside the church versus what happens, or the way it's viewed from outside, the role of women within the church, the crisis of faith, all of these kind of things, which is all played out in this thriller. And basically what happens, and I'm not going to go into the plot because if I do that, I'll start giving spoilers, and I don't want to do that. But there's this campaign there are these 4 major candidates for the new Pope. The Dean that's sort of conducting the College of the Cardinals, or the Conclave, which is played by Ralph Fiennes, is slowly uncovering stories about all of the major candidates. And he feels like it's his duty to inform the cardinals of these bits of information that is coming to hand. Some of it's being released against each other in a campaign. In other areas, he's finding out from various actors. And it's all very, very political. And it makes for what I would think is it basically is an NUS national conference or an ALP national conference, but with far more impressive uniforms and better looking office space. That's the way I would, if you haven't seen it, that's how I would view it. If you've ever been on an NUS conference or an ALP national conference, it's basically the same thing, but just they've got better gear. So, first of all, before we sort of do the plot, can we talk about Ralph Fiennes for a moment and his character? He's this reluctant dean of the Vatican, where he doesn't, he's clearly he's the standout character, and by that I mean he's got, he's flawed as they all are, but he's a good person, and so you're naturally drawn to him as, why aren't you running for Pope? Like, you are who should be the Pope. Ralph Fiennes as a character, is he one of the more underrated actors that is kicking around today. Because as I'm watching him perform, again, this is a pretty amazing performance, and I'm sort of thinking about his own, filmography that brought him to this role. He's pretty good. Like, I don't know if it's worth just going through some of the stuff he's done. Like, I'd forgotten that he first came on our screens in Schindler's List.
No, I always remember him from Schindler's List, but I mean, he's also Voldemort. So he's got a pretty wide range there. He's in one of my favourite rom-coms called Maid in Manhattan with Jennifer Lopez, where he falls in love with the maid, who is Jennifer Lopez. He's an incredible actor, and I wasn't thinking he was Voldemort, coming in to run the Conclave. So he's very impressive.
On top of that, like, he was Mallory or M in the Bond series. He did 3 Bonds as well. And so when I look at him now, I think of him either as M or I think of him as Gustav in Grand Budapest Hotel, the Wes Anderson film, which he was extremely good at that and incredibly funny. But also remember, he was in Bruges.
I haven't seen In Bruges. It's it's very poor of me, but I need to do it.
If you talk about range, to go from like a Nazi to Voldemort to M to someone who could one day be Pope to then you have to throw in the character from In Bruges, because he's a prick, but it's funny, it's comical, but he's such a good actor. And I just think that if you take him out of this film, I wondered if this is actually a good film, because it basically is hung on him. He's in nearly every scene.
Yeah, we definitely are seeing this all play out, through his eyes, and it's great. I loved the scenes where he got a bit angry, because it's so quiet in those corridors, in the Sistine Chapel, in their rooms, and, when he raises his voice, there is a scene where, he says to another cardinal, I don't want your vote. It's very commanding. I kind of love how he kind of lost his mind a little bit at certain times, because it would be crazy. Imagine having to run the conclave.
Yeah,
I could not.
They talk about the patience of a priest, and clearly there are moments where he just becomes impatient. That scene when when the conclave is called, all the cardinals have to stay in the same location at a convent across. Well, the way they set it up here was across town. I don't know if that's actually the case, but so they're all billeted basically in these rooms, individual rooms, and they've all been given these packs. Kind of like when you board on an aircraft, you get given your what do you call it, your toiletry bag, right? Mm. He's trying to unzip the toiletry bag, and he just gets this plastic thing. He just can't do it. He absolutely cracks the shit and just tries to rip it apart. But just moments like that create this sort of, he's patient and he's trying to bring people together, but even in these moments of solitude, he just cracks the shits with the toiletry bag, which I just think is great acting and well directed and well written and stuff. It made for good pacing in the film. What are some of the themes for you that stood out that was of interest to you? I know I named a bunch there. I don't know if you can see my show notes there, but which ones were sort of like, yeah, this is interesting and needed to be acknowledged?
Yeah, I think for me the whole thing was about power, right? That was the big theme for me. How far are you willing to go to get the power? Who are you going to side with? That was a big sort of theme in the film. And the other big theme is maybe not so much, women in the church. I loved, there's this shot. So there's a couple of nuns obviously working around while the conclave is on, and there's the head sister, Sister Agnes, played by Isabella Rossellini. And, while Cardinal Lawrence, Ray Fiennes' character, is giving his big opening homily to the beginning of the conclave, she's sitting outside, alone And, you know, she can only hear what he's saying from the room behind her, from the outside. So, yeah, I thought, you know, it was interesting, the sort of commentary on, you know, the role of women in the Catholic Church. And then, yeah, that was it for me, really. But I agree with you that it definitely felt like, you know, a political party conference right from the beginning.
I want to pick up on some of those moments in a minute, but just to the role of the women in the church reflections there. Yeah, the way in which it was directed to show the inequality, not just that scene of her sitting outside, but also when she is in the room when the new cardinal from Kabul, from Afghanistan, says a prayer and acknowledges the women that have made the food today. And she sort of looks up and has a wry smile of acknowledgement. But also the scene when Rafe Fiennes walks through the kitchen and it's just all nuns cooking, preparing the food and cleaning. So it's this sort of, you know, this contrast between all of these men that are actually running the church and are powerful and voting and making decisions. But then there's all the women that are having to do all of the, you know, the matriarchal cliche roles throughout it. But, you know, even Isabella Rossellini, there are moments where she tries to stand up, which I thought was interesting. And there were two particular moments, obviously. One where she says, and I think it was one of my favorite quotes from the film, where she says, although we sisters are expected to be silent, we do have eyes and ears. And then that's when she pours a bucket of shit on Trent and basically gets energy. So there is some power, even though it is limited. And I thought that was I just thought that was an interesting way of.
Yeah, you can tell, even though, like, Isabella Rossellini doesn't have a lot of screen time, right? She doesn't have a lot of dialogue even, but, you know, that scene in particular was very telling, very powerful. You know, and you can tell she sort of wields this power. You know, she knows a lot more about, you know, the ins and outs of what's happening in the Vatican than, you know, a lot of the cardinals who are just sort of fighting with each other, really. Yeah.
So here are my NUS conference, ALP NAT conference reflections that are basically same but different. Caucus meetings in the cinema, arguing about policy positions within the church, tick. I've had that happen at Ballarat University for NUS conferences. We'd go over that cinema there and have a bit of a yarn about what we're pleased and not pleased about. And no, you know, don't go too liberal to those voters because you're not going to win them over, and sort of working out the different blocks within the church. The shit sheet at breakfast to kill off Cardinal Trimble's candidacy. Classic move. Seen that happen at an NUS conference where a shit sheet's got dropped at dinner at just to absolutely pour a bucket of it on the trots or whatever else you want to undermine their candidacy. Late minute accreditations of a delegate to get onto conference.
I was like, this would never happen. Like, it would never have been allowed at a national conference. Like, no way.
Oh, New South Wales Student Unity are trying to pull that stuff all the time. Oh, they're in our delegation now, are they? Right. Well, did they actually vote for us at a NUS conference in New South Wales? No, but, you know, we're pretty sure we're going to, you know, yeah, you just want them to through the caucus vote, but then they'll probably go and vote elsewhere when we get to the actual National Office Bureau vote. Well, it turns out factually that can't happen. This creation in pectore, where a pontiff post, mortem can write and get someone admitted into the conclave. It's not possible. It's not part of party rule. That would definitely have to go to rules committee for that to get passed.
There probably is a rules committee somewhere in the Vatican.
There's definitely a rules committee. And I bet you it's the same people that's been on rules committee for the last 15 years. And they won't refuse to leave. Voting, long, drawn-out ballots, really grumpy returning officers sitting at the top of the table. Typical Europeans, first past the post voting won't do preferential voting system, so you can just knock it off in one ballot, one count. So therefore, it goes forever. Required 2/3 majority. Although I do like a ballot box that's made of gold and silver. I think the Labor Party could probably bring that into some of our elections. That would be good as opposed to those army green tin ones that we use, certainly here in Victoria. And I just also wonder, I wrote a reflection as we were going through it. I thought it was gripping television because I'm both a student of politics and I'm Catholic. So therefore it's got a double whammy for me. But I'm wondering if you're a non-believer, either both non-Catholic believer or non-true believer, do you like this show? Do you find this cinema gripping? I know it's hard for you to also answer that, Tess, but just pretend you're...
I'm also a Catholic and I'm also in and around politics. I think so. I think it's gripping enough. I think for sure. It's got good pace. Like if you think about it, we never leave the Vatican, right? But you're still sort of on the edge of your seat wondering what's happened. And the way it shows so good, there's a lot of like shadow and darkness and like secret, secret meetings like those caucus meetings. And yeah, I think it holds up. I mean, the religious part of it, I think would probably be fascinating to people who are not religious or not Catholic, because it is a wild thing to happen still.
I did think it. Did you think that it wasn't actually so Catholic? There wasn't a lot of Catholic cliches through it. Well, it wasn't like over the top.
No, I mean they weren't turning water into wine or eating loaves and fishes. No, there wasn't too much like. It was, as I said, like for me, the big thing was power and the religion came sort of like secondary. Like I didn't think if you weren't religious or you weren't Catholic that you wouldn't, you would feel too left out of the story and wouldn't know what's going on. Yeah,
right. Apparently I read some stat that out of the audiences that went and saw it in the cinema, the 70% of them were 55 years and older and Caucasian. Like it just really hit this particular sweet spot.
Well, this was a weakness of mine because, pardon the pun, but I have a confession. I watched this at home because I couldn't get to this. It moved to the pensioner time slot really quick. Like it moved to 10 a.m. in the cinema on a weekday, like really fast. So I know a lot of those over 50s white men and women at the Kino cinema on Collins Street, during the middle of the day watching it. But I couldn't get to the cinema to go see it, so I had to watch it at home. And what happened was I fell asleep at the final ballot.
Wow.
So I did really love this movie, but it was a long week for me. It was like Friday night, and I fell asleep at the final ballot, and I woke up, at the end, and Cardinal Lawrence is having a conversation with someone, and it's this big final plot twist, and I was like, what the hell has just happened here? Yeah. So I had to go back and watch it. So I would agree that I don't think a lot of young people are watching this film, but they should. It's a great film. It's a great drama. It's a great thriller.
You've jumped onto some weaknesses. Is there any other strengths you wanted to name before we go to the rest of the weaknesses?
Mine was just, the attention to detail. I think just reiterating what I said before about, not leaving the Vatican, but, you're really drawn to what was happening, the Cardinal Lawrence getting frustrated with not being able to open his bag, the pulling the ring off the Pope's, dead finger, these really like long moments that sort of really drew you sort of and kept your pace. So the attention to detail for me was really good.
Even down to when they were doing the last battle, you were asleep, but when they were doing the last battle, there's a breeze that comes through from outside.
Yes.
Some of the ballot papers ruffle, and it's been interpreted that was the work of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
My interpretation was it was like a breath of fresh air, like something new coming in. Like it's a new day, a new dawn.
Yeah.
But that's the great thing about cinema. It can be interpreted many different ways. The Holy Spirit trying to come in. Interesting.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, weaknesses. I've got really wide and ranging ones, from basic things like you would never discuss what's going on in the ballot count when you're back on the bus heading back to your quarters. Like, it's never going to happen. And it's like, arguably, this is one of the most important elections in the history of elections in the world, right? Like, this is big time. This is probably Mount Rushmore of global elections, behind the US presidency, probably the president of FIFA. So you don't want to get this one wrong. And you're not sitting there on the bus having a yarn with a bloke beside you, the other priest next to you, because everyone is listening to every conversation. So you're going to be waiting till you get back to the digs before you have a little bit of a powwow and a debrief about how today went and the vote count, right?
I mean, I assumed it was just their faction on the bus, not every single cardinal. But I take your point. You wouldn't be having those meetings on a bus.
The Cardinal or Aldo, the Stanley Tucci, sort of begins as a bit of a hardline liberal. Like, I am not budging on my position about more, homosexuality in the church, women in the church. We need to be more open and progressive in that respect. And then when Ray finds, when Thomas goes to him and says, I've got all this dirt and I'm going to drop it at Brecky, he's like, whoa, I'm not doing that. And I was kind of like, do you want to win it or not? Because he accused Ray Fiennes earlier of being a bit sort of pissweak and not having enough backbone to help him win the ballot. And then all of a sudden he has some moral line. And I was like, oh, where did that come from? It just didn't seem consistent with his character.
No, he definitely took a turn. Sort of halfway, quite early on in the film, actually. I mean, he was just really frustrated with himself, no?
Yeah, and his candidacy just completely collapsed.
Well, he never had the numbers to begin with, right? So in the first ballot, I don't want to give away too much, but, I didn't. And then he got all pissy and angry, which is, quite typical, really, of of leaders, I think, that when they don't get their way. But that turn was an interesting plot twist for me. And I didn't like seeing Stanley Tucci as it portrayed in a negative light, because I love Stanley Tucci. I found that quite hard to watch.
And there's a lesson to any candidate: just pick up the phone, just get on the phone, get your number sheet, yes, no, maybe, and just start ringing through.
Well, he was, at the beginning he was all feigning, I don't want it, I don't want it. And, hoping that would be enough. But, yeah, you're right. Pick up the phone. You got to do your numbers, which he had that other cardinal doing his numbers. So I don't know what he was doing. Like, he was the one sort of agitating. And I think he was the one in the bus that was like, we don't have them. But, yes, very interesting. Like, he didn't want to do the bargaining himself. He was above it.
Yeah. You got to get your hands dirty, man.
100%.
Another weakness, the convent that all the cardinals were staying in during the conclave looked like a 3-star hotel. Like, I know that they're taking a vow of poverty, but, come on. You can put us up in a bit better digs than the one. It was just these polished marble rooms that look so bare. Like,
have you been to the Vatican?
I have.
I think it seemed like it is grim, I think. The residents. I don't think they live a life of lavishness, I don't think, but still sort of beautiful, even with the marble walls and floors. I was really fascinated about whether how the light comes down, the shutters comes down and, no light comes in at all. I was like, do they really have to live in the dark for that whole time? I have to Google if that's true or not. I don't know. Yeah, they can't even see out into the outside world while it's on.
Yeah, I always thought that they stayed in the Sistine Chapel, but evidently that's not the case. I thought they locked them.
Take their sleeping bags.
Yeah, like
year 10 camp. Take your little stretcher.
So I always thought they used to lock the door and then break the key, and then basically someone would yell through. Now, no one's coming out until you sort it out. And sort of slip food through a little hole in the wall or something. I reckon that's what they did years ago.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure it's changed, but over time, right? The way they do it, but I'm going to Google that because we actually could have. I mean, hopefully not, but hopefully he pulls through. But the current Pope is quite ill, so we could have a conclave on our hands sooner rather than later.
Old Papa Francesco, absolutely. Love that one. We love that Pope. Any other weaknesses that you had?
No, that was it. I loved it. I watched it again last night, and yeah, I thought it was a great film. No other weaknesses.
Did read the view that the portrayal of the Nigerian cardinal was problematic for playing into the stereotype that black men are sexually aggressive, and that why was it the black cleric was the one who had been up to no good as a younger man, and all the white clerics get off the hook. So there's this Western Catholicism view of the world, and people had a bit of a problem with that, which I hadn't even thought about until I had sort of read that. I was like, that's actually a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just goes to Tremblay got hit pretty hard with a couple of controversies as well. I mean, not to the same sort of stereotypes, but I guess that's a fair point.
Yeah, Tremblay had these sort of fingers in the till and just good old-fashioned corruption as opposed to fathering a child. Anyway, other bits, things that were of interest, some things I was want to name. The track, the way you touched on it earlier, the way it was filmed, the tracking shots, the sort of slow motion, even some of the way that some of the scenes were laid out. There was a scene where Isabella Rossellini's character is set, she's in her nun vestments and sort of like a pinky or yellow wall, but she's shot right in the middle. It had a bit of a Wes Anderson sort of setting to it. And interestingly enough, it's the same production company, Indian Paintbrush, that does the Wes Anderson films, but I couldn't see any in my sort of late minute internet research. I didn't find the other connection between Anderson and this particular director, but there was some stuff in there. The sort of side tracking shots had kind of a Wes Anderson sort of vibe about it. If you just chucked some, the Who over the top of it, it could have felt like a Wes Anderson film instead of a gripping thriller. I don't know. What did you pick up?
No, I had that in my notes too. It definitely felt like the way it was shot, the way they framed the locations, especially outside, definitely felt like a Wes Anderson film. Some of the scenes in the whole in the stairwell, with sort of Stanley Tucci's character popping his head down to see who's walking down the stairwell. That's interesting that it's the same. Did you say production company?
Yeah, Indian Paintbrush.
Yeah.
Did you read this, that apparently the way that they filmed Conclave, in which they would shoot the character from in front, but then when they wanted to set the next scene, they would then shoot the character from behind, like you said before, when one of the cardinals is leaning over the balcony to look down, and then that takes you to the next scene, which is down the courtyard of the chapel. And apparently by filming in that manner, front shot, dialogue, back shot into the next scene, it stops you from picking your phone up.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a link. Because what happens naturally when you watch a film is that in between scenes,
breaks.
You get a break. And then the next scene is like an establishing shot. And so you're like, oh, here's my chance to grab my phone, how conditioned we've become to these things. But apparently, it was filmed in a way that you were less likely to do it because they're shooting the next scene with the previous character already in it, if that makes sense. So it links you.
That's incredible. I mean, is that what Netflix does to keep me binging on television shows episode after episode? I don't know.
I don't know. They're just absolutely playing with us now. These
they're in our minds.
They are. The other two things I took away from it that I enjoyed was just more on the way it was shot. One of the scenes I loved, there was the uniformity of the conclave, same vestments, They intentionally filmed it in a way that they were, they're always wearing, and that's what they do. They all wear the same vestments. But 180 odd in one big room, it looks uniform.
Mm.
The scene, I don't know if you remember it, but when it was the scene in the rain from above,
Yes.
and they're all walking back in towards the Sistine Chapel. They've all got the same white umbrellas.
Yeah.
And as they're sort of just meandering in their own little way, like kind of like little mice or something heading towards I don't know what that was meant to represent, but they held that shot for like 10 seconds. I don't know. What did you take from that? What was the director trying to say?
Oh, I don't know. Is white the colour of peace? Sort of, because that's just before the final ballot, I think, maybe. Is it? I think it is.
It is.
Well, maybe it's a bit of foreshadowing. I don't know. But I definitely noted that down as well. That was a beautiful shot from above of all the umbrellas.
And the other reflection I had on it was, and it's something that made me think about. You asked me before if I have been to the Vatican. Tess, have you been to the Vatican?
I have been to the Vatican. Yes.
When I've visited St. Peter's, or like last year, I was fortunate enough to go to Rio, and I climbed all the way up to Christ Redeemer. Or if you go to maybe Notre Dame in Paris, or St. Patrick's in Manhattan, sort of all of the kind of the Mount Rushmores of the Catholic Church. But particularly Christ Redeemer and particularly St. Peter's, is what I am reminded of is that the 1.3 billion Catholics are incredibly diverse. I know that the leadership of the church with the question of gender is not diverse. But the flock is incredibly diverse. And, when you go to St. Peter's, you're, particularly when you grow up in Australia, which is a very sort of Irish or Eastern European Catholic community, changing a lot more in the outer suburbs, particularly with sort of South Vietnamese and Sinhalese and Filipino and other parts of Africa now. But broadly speaking, I certainly grew up in country Victoria. It was a very white upbringing, right? And it's only when you go to St. Peter's or you go to Rio that you're rubbing shoulders, and you are rubbing shoulders because it's packed with the world. Catholics from Africa, from Latin America, from Europe, from Asia, from Central Asia, from the Middle East. And I thought the film subtly paid acknowledgement to that. Like when the close-ups of the cardinals when they were completing their ballot papers, the colour of their hands was different. The languages spoken throughout by everyone, right? It wasn't always English. It wasn't always Latin or Italian or Spanish. Priests going up and praying in their own language, and it kind of like just re-emphasised that, there's a lot of us, and we actually are from all four corners of the world. And I just thought that was an interesting theme that sprayed throughout the film, and an important reminder from those who are raised in the Celtic Catholic wing that we are incredibly broad church.
Yeah, I guess because I'm also sort of Filipino as well. I've sort of always had sort of a variety of different people in my life, like follow the Catholic religion. But it is nice when you go to the Vatican and there are people from all across the world saying a prayer and believing sort of in each other. So it is nice.
Doing their thing.
Yeah.
Would this been better as a film or a TV series?
A film for sure. Like, what could a series? What like a ballot an episode? How much further are we gonna explore the lives of these cardinals within the confines of the Sistine Chapel? I don't know. I think a film.
I could have done a TV series. I could have found out more about each of the four candidates over each episode.
But if you were still just staying inside the conclave, Like, you think we could have found out more about them sort of within that without sort of dipping back in time or sort of changing the location?
Well, because I didn't know that Tremblay was Canadian, and I didn't know he was a moderate until I read the show notes. There was a question over, was he telling the truth about the last conversation that he did have with the Holy Father? Like, there were things there to be unpacked. The story of Adeyemi, the Nigerian cardinal, and the relationship that he had with people from back home. Like, I think there were things that you could have unpacked that could have made it into an interesting TV series.
Yeah. Maybe it will be one day.
Would you have bought the soundtrack or just listened to it at Sanity with the headphones at the booth?
Listen for free. I mean, we are in a cost of living crisis. Well, I mean, the other option is just to go to Mass, because that's free as well.
That is true. I listened to it when I was just doing the run sheet last night in bed. It's not a great soundtrack. And in fact, there's only one or two pieces of music that is sort of liturgical, choral kind of. Yeah. The rest of it.
Yeah, there was a severe lack of hymns for a movie about the Catholic Church.
Dude, that was it. And I read up about it. The soundtrack dude, and it was a dude, intentionally didn't choose liturgical music. He wanted each subtopic had a theme of music, and he used intentionally new age instruments, like bullshit, So yeah, soundtrack garbage. Takeaway. Where was he? Here I am, Lord. Absolute banger of opportunity there. Strong and constant. Another great.
Well, I guess all the songs would have had to be in not in English, in Latin. So we probably wouldn't know the words anyway.
Yeah, that's true. How would News Limited or Fairfax reported this in a headline? I said that News Limited or The Hun would have went history made as woman becomes Pope in shock Vatican twist, secret kept for decades. Or the other one would be miracle or cover up ? I blame Dan Andrews.
Okay, well, I've got a Herald Sun headline, but it does give away the ending. So if you don't want to know the ending,
spoiler alert.
Tune out for the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, here it comes.
But mine would have been something like El Papa, Catholics go loco for new Pope.
That's very good.
Or from Kabul to Conclave, but Conclave with a K, new Pope in surprise win.
Ah, nice. And if it had been in The Age, it would have been Church at a crossroads, Vatican faces crisis of doctrine and unity.
Yeah, I had New Hope, can the first Mexican Pope save Catholicism from its horrifying past?
Oh, The Age loves nothing more than Catholics and Jews. That's cool. All right. Are there any social democrats in this show? I didn't have any. Oh, I mean, maybe if Stanley Tucci leaves the faith and decides to run as a Democrat back in the States, I could see that happening. But really, social democrats, they're in there for you.
No, I didn't have any.
Is there a Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard, Bob Hawke, or Paul Keating in this film?
You answer this, please.
When he thinks he's Bob Hawke, except he can't count, so actually he's Bill Hayden. And I said that the Cardinal from Kabul is Julia Gillard. Never really wanted it, but everyone else is doing the numbers for him anyway.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah. I'm going to abstain from answering this question. I have some thoughts about it, but I don't want to offend anyone.
All right. We could do a director's cut version. 10 years time, perhaps.
Yes, subscribe to find out more.
Mel Colston Wood, most likely to rat.
Tremblay.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
The worst.
Yeah, the worst.
The worst.
Yeah. Who's the weakest link, actor or character?
Mine was the turtle at the end of the film. Where did the turtle come from and what was the symbolism? I haven't had time to research that, but I will after this.
Well, wasn't it the old Pontiff's turtles?
Yeah. So
I felt like it was saying he'd crawled in back into into St. Peter's, and he was just basically giving the nod of approval to the new
All right, to the new Pope.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Thank you for explaining it to me.
I'm just guessing. I don't think I had a weakest link. The only other interesting thing was apparently the vaping by Tedesco is a big thing. It's a big meme. And the actor that played him actually does vape. And he asked the director, look, man, I really need to smoke. These scenes are long. Can I just keep smoking in set? And the director said, yeah, no worries, go for it. And he said, can you get me a red vape so it matches my vestments? And so I did. And that became apparently it's a meme.
I don't think we didn't actually talk about Tedesco's performance. He is the conservative Italian cardinal who's, gaming to win. But he was excellent. Like, we've seen that guy do the numbers, in a Labor Party conference room. Of all of the cardinals, he to me felt like, a political figure. He was great.
He reminded me of someone that you and I both know. I reckon he looked like B-Max, and that's all I will say. I won't say his full name. Out there who's listening, because I know you listen to the show as well. He does. He looks like you. Even acting. Do you agree?
Yeah, like in the future at some point, sure.
The glasses. And his politics aren't too dissimilar either. All right. I have one more question for you before we go. Oh, no, quotable lines. Like I said the one before about what Isabella Rossellini said, about the sisters. When there was a caucus meeting in the hallway, he says, Ray Fine says, is this completely necessary? I feel like I'm some American politician at a convention. As I look at the numbers in the stairwell. That was a great line. In his homily at the start, certainty is the enemy of unity, which kind of set up, I think, one of the themes for the show. And when one of the cardinals was still just trying to save his candidacy, he said, I sensed the presence of the Holy Spirit this morning, and he wants me still to run. I was like, you can't call on the Holy Spirit in this moment, all right? Otherwise, we're all going to be doing it, and we're all going to be back to square one. So, rule number 3, do not invoke the Holy Spirit in a moment of need when you think your candidacy is going down the gurgle.
They were good. Good lines.
Out of 5, National Conference delegate quotas, what would you give it, Tess?
4.5 for me.
Yeah, right.
I thought it was a fantastic film to watch. I wish I got to see it in the cinema.
Yeah, good point, actually. It should have been I saw it at home as well. So, yeah. No, you're right there. That's, it was a big film. It's a big screen film, for sure. If we have a Vatican Council III and we modernise and we let women be ordained priests and therefore can eventually become Pope, and in that moment, Tess, if you were elected Pope at a conclave, what name would you choose?
I mean, would I have to choose a male? This question to me is layered with complexities. Would I have to choose a male name? It's a saint, right?
Woman's saint name, yeah.
Well, my real name is actually Teresa, so could I just do that? Because I think Saint Teresa is a saint.
Yeah, Saint Teresa is a saint. You heard it here first. Any great sisters doing their confirmation and uncertain as to whether or not they do a project on Saint Teresa, I can confirm Saint Teresa is a saint.
Excellent. What about you?
Patrick. There's never been a St. Patrick. There's never been a Pope Patrick. Pope Patrick's a great name.
That is excellent. Why do they always pick? I got to be honest with you. I sort of tapped out at following the Pope's name, sort of at John Paul II. They're always called John Paul or Benedict or Francis. So I didn't even know Patrick. Yeah. Why isn't there a Patrick? That's amazing.
I don't think there's ever been a Pope Francis until
this one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's been plenty of Johns and Pauls and John Pauls, but and Piuses, because that's like Pius VI, I think we got up to at one point. Well, I think a lot of the popes were Italian. Well, the first non-Italian pope for a long, long time was John Paul II. It was Polish. And then we had old mate from Germany.
Ratzinger.
Yeah. Benedict. And I think we're starting to spread out a bit. In 100 years' time, one of the Pope's names will be named after someone from Game of Thrones. Probably, you never know.
You never know. Well, I'm hoping there's a Filipino priest somewhere that's in the running to become the next Pope. I'd back him in.
If you had a vote, if only you had a vote.
Are we rolling tortellini in the kitchen instead?
Yeah. Teresa Farrell, thank you so much for your contribution to our special Easter pop culture podcast. Have a very good, happy, holy Easter.
Happy Easter to you too. Enjoy celebrating, relaxing. Eating meat for the first time. I assume you haven't been eating meat.
Oh, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
And to everyone else out there, I want you all to have a restful, joyous, long weekend if you don't celebrate the death and resurrection of our Lord. And if you do, have a happy holy Easter. Don't forget, we're still doing all of our federal election weekly recaps with David Feeney and Jesse McCrone. Next week, we'll be doing another one. Our special guest will be former digital director in the Andrews government, Reid Fleming, will be coming on. And then we've got one more before we wrap up, also before the election comes itself. And also we're doing our Path to 76 monster episode where we break down every single battleground seat across the country with a whole bunch of different guests from all the various respective states and territories as well. So look out for that. The podcast has ended. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thank you, Tess.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Socially Democratic. Like the podcast, hit the follow or subscribe button, and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser, and get all the latest updates on Socially Democratic by following us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. See you next Friday.